Hello, fellow artists. Welcome back to another lesson with Rivera Fine Art Studios. Today what I wanted to do was talk about a piece that I'm working on as a commission, and I'm going to do a 2 and possibly a 3-part demonstration for this. So the first part is going to be me setting up the values for this drawing, and I'm doing that with charcoal and a white pencil on a gray tone paper. And what I'm actually going to do is then, once I finish the tonal stage, I'm going to spray the drawing with fixative and apply color on top of this using pastels. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the materials. I'm using a BFK Reeves paper, and this is a very light gray tone. They're sold in large sheets. You can get them in 30 by 40 inch sheets, so I've basically cut one of those in half. And it has a little bit of texture to it. It's really nice when you're working with pastels because it really absorbs the medium very well. Now for this stage, because I'm just working on the values, I'm not really applying any color just yet. So what I'm using is charcoal, and 2 different types of charcoal. So the initial stages, just kind of blocking out the outline for this. For that I'm using the Nitram charcoal stick, and I've sharpened that up to a nice fine point. And this is about a medium hardness. Then for the really intense darks, I'm using my General's charcoal pencil, and this is a 2B, so again about a medium hardness. And then for my lights, I'm using a General's charcoal white pencil. Okay, and for all of these materials, I've sharpened them up to a nice fine point. Okay, so first I want to just kind of go through how you can use these different materials and the effects that you can get with each one. So each one has a slightly different value. So if you use them separately, you can create different values. And then what I've also done is blended a few areas. So what I want to do is talk about that. I'm going to create a couple little value scales here and talk about how you can work the materials separately and then how you can work them together to actually create a little bit of warm and cool in the drawing. Okay, so if we think about a value scale that is, the range is from a light, a really bright light, a white, you could say, all the way down to a pretty intense dark. The lightest value, obviously, I'm going to create that using my white pencil. But you can see when I put that right up against this value, this is the value of the paper, you can really see how much darker that is when you put a white right up next to it. So this would be my absolute lightest value. Okay, so obviously I can control how light I'm going based on how heavily I'm applying that pencil, but you know, there's definitely other gradations between this light and this gray, but I'm just going to kind of simplify it for right now into 4 basic values. Just using the mediums and showing what the mediums can do alone. So if I come over here with my Nitram charcoal, so this is a soft charcoal, creates some powder and some dust. It's very easy to blend, very easy to erase. But if I come in and I'm really just kind of pressing down, applying full pressure, you can see that that creates a fairly dark value, but it's not a true black. We could say this is more of a dark gray. Okay, and then the darkest values I'm going to create using my charcoal pencil. So the charcoal pencil is a little bit different from the charcoal sticks. This really has more permanence, so it's not as easy to correct. If you are pushing that dark all the way down, you want to make sure that that's the value you're going for. So once again, I'm just using full pressure here, and I'm really trying to just create as dark of a value that I can using this medium. So much darker than the Nitram charcoal. So that is really what all of the mediums can do separately. Each one has its own inherent value, including the paper tone. But now I want to talk about what effects we can create if we layer and blend these materials together. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do, even in a tonal drawing, is start to incorporate a little bit of warm and cool. If I'm just thinking in warm and cool grays, that can give a really nice effect to the form and the light. So basically, if we mix the white with the charcoal, that's going to create a cool gray. And that's going to contrast very nicely against the value of the paper, because the value of the paper is fairly warm. Okay, so let's see what that does. So if I was to just drop another square down here and another one here, I'm going to mix the white with the compressed charcoal, and I'm going to mix the white with the Nitram charcoal, and we'll see what the differences are. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Nitram charcoal, and I'm not going to go quite as dark here. I'm going to use about 50% pressure, maybe even a little bit less than that. So I'm just trying to create a little bit of a darker value than the paper, but not too dark. And then I'm going to blend my white pencil with this. So once I've kind of laid down an area like that, I'm going to take my white charcoal pencil and I'm going to mix it in with that Nitram charcoal. Okay, so the temperature of that gray, you can see, is quite a bit cooler than the paper, the value of the paper. And then I could always layer my charcoal back over this as well. I wanted to push that value a little bit darker. Okay, so let's try the same thing now using the charcoal pencil, the dark General's charcoal pencil. So again, about medium pressure here, 50% pressure roughly, just to create some value. Now, what we can see is just by itself, this the charcoal pencil is cooler than the Nitram charcoal. So if I was to then take my white pencil and layer that over top of this, you can see that it's really pushing that more towards almost a blue-gray. It definitely has some coolness to it. Okay, so for the rest of this demonstration, I'm actually going to speed it up. I'm just going to focus on drawing the baby, and I will put notes up as I'm working, but I'm really just going to focus on my values as well as my warm and my cool. So if you notice, you can see that I've started to already incorporate some cool grays into the pattern of the shirt, and then I'm leaving the areas of flesh tone very, very warm. So I'm going to continue to do that as I work on the arms and so forth. I'm not really going to work on the background at all because I'm going to work direct color into the background. So I'm only going to focus on the figure at this point. So without any further ado, I'm going to dive right into it. Okay, so I'm starting off here with my Nitram charcoal, and I like using that for this initial lay-in of the values just because it is very easy to blend and move around. It's not as permanent as the charcoal pencil. And one thing that I should mention is the difference really between the pencil and the Nitram charcoal stick is the binding. So the pencil is made up of compressed charcoal. It actually has a little bit of oil in it, which is why it is so much darker and more permanent than the Nitram charcoal. Okay, so now I'm switching to my white charcoal pencil, and that is really just to add a little bit of a highlight on the arm. I want to make that look round and cylindrical. And now I'm moving to the dark creases in the arm. So this is an area where I really want to kind of create sharper, slightly darker lines. I want to really push the darks there and make it look as though each one of those creases is falling into a little bit of deeper shadow. And then I'm constantly going back and just kind of blending and looking at how my values relate. So one thing you want to be careful of is when you do have really dark values, such as the creases of the arm, is that the surrounding value is really dark enough so that they don't stand out too much. So I'm using a technique here. I'm just kind of lightly veiling over these values. I'm sort of pulling areas together. And basically what this does is this just helps to eliminate areas that might look choppy or areas where the transitions might seem too abrupt. Okay, so now moving on to the shirt. This is probably one of my lightest values, so I'm with my white charcoal pencil, I'm really just kind of bearing down and really trying to push that and make that a really intense white. And now I'm doing the same thing on the sleeve here. I'm just, I've switched over to my dark charcoal pencil and I'm really pushing that value to a very dark. So you always want to look for those absolutes. Okay, so I've just sped forward a little bit here, and basically what I've done is I've blended out those values in the shirt, and now I'm going back over them, layering over top of that with my white pencil to create some of those cool grays. Okay, and now moving on to the hair, and this is an area that I feel like a lot of people struggle with. It is, there's a lot of detail, a lot of information there, so the trick is really just to look for the light and the dark shapes. If we think of the hair in terms of light and shadow, it's going to add more dimension. And also look at the big shapes first, and then gradually you can add more and more detail. Okay, so now I'm just adding a few finishing touches, basically just blending a few areas out and making a few adjustments on the value. But that pretty much is it for the tonal stage of this drawing. Tune in for next week's lesson where I will begin to add some color on top of this. See you then.